The sun had just risen over the Mentawai Islands, painting the water gold. It was October 18th, 2024, and Italian surfer Giulia Manfrini was doing what she loved most, waiting for the perfect wave at the Bang Bang surf break-off Massacut Island. The ocean was calm, surfers drifted on their boards, and nothing about that morning seemed dangerous. But in shallow water, danger often hides where no one expects it. Out of nowhere, the sea broke its silence. A needlefish, long, thin, and razor-billed, launched from the surface like a spear. These creatures are known to dart at terrifying speeds, but no one could have predicted what came next. The fish struck Giulia directly in the chest, its sharp bill driving deep into her upper left side. Witnesses froze in shock. The impact was so sudden, so violent, that she let out a scream before collapsing on her board. Panic erupted. Surfers paddled furiously toward her as waves rolled in. A friend tried to hold her, but the ocean seemed to conspire against them. A massive set crashed down, scattering rescuers and dragging her limp body beneath the surface. For a moment, she resurfaced, dazed, eyes searching for help. Then, as another swell approached, she fainted. By the time they pulled her to the beach, her breathing was shallow, her skin pale, foam clinging near her nose. Resort staff and fellow surfers worked desperately, performing first aid, shielding her from waves, trying everything to bring her back. They rushed her to a nearby health center, fighting the clock, fighting the impossible. But the wound was too deep, the damage too severe. Giulia was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The surfing world reeled. Needlefish accidents are rare, almost unheard of. Yet, here was a young woman, 36 years old, a former professional snowboarder turned surfer, a co-founder of A-Wave Travel, gone in a heartbeat. Her partner and friends remembered her smile, her energy, her way of lighting up every room, every trip. She died doing what she loved, in a place that she loved. Her business partner, James Colston, said, though the words carried more heartbreak than comfort. For locals, the tragedy was a grim reminder that the ocean, for all its beauty, can be merciless. Needlefish don't hunt humans. They don't stalk or plot. But when they leap from the water at high speed, their bills can pierce flesh and bone like a blade. Survivors of such attacks often carry scars, if they survive at all. Giulia was not given that chance. Her death sent shockwaves across both surfing and travel communities. She wasn't just a surfer chasing waves. She was a traveler, a coach, an adventurer whose love for the ocean had carried her across the globe. Friends said she couldn't travel anywhere without people falling in love with her laugh, her spirit, her endless energy. And then, in the blink of an eye, a single strike ended everything. Not a shark, not a storm, but a fish. Something so small compared to the vast sea, yet powerful enough to pierce her heart. That is the cruel irony of shallow water tragedies. The danger doesn't always look like danger. Sometimes it looks like nothing at all. Mount Fuji is often admired as Japan's majestic symbol of beauty and culture. But in winter, it transforms into something far more unforgiving. The mountain's icy slopes, powerful winds, and unpredictable weather turn every step into a potential mistake with devastating consequences. In December 2013, a group of climbers experienced this danger firsthand in what became one of the most talked-about incidents on Fuji in recent years, a fatal winter fall that not only led to tragedy, but also sparked a heated debate about rescue operations and legal responsibility. The climbers, part of an experienced mountaineering group, were practicing winter techniques on the Gotemba route. Conditions were harsh. Snow and ice made the ground treacherous, and the cold was biting. At some point during their ascent, they slipped. Because they were roped together, what might have been a single fall cascaded into a collective disaster. The climbers slid down hundreds of meters, essentially helpless against gravity and ice. Rescue teams were quickly dispatched, braving the elements to locate and extract them. 2 climbers were found in critical condition, essentially without signs of life, while others survived and were evacuated by helicopter. The physical toll was severe, but what came afterward pushed this accident into public and legal discourse. Normally, accidents on Fuji are reported as cautionary tales, reminders of the risks of climbing outside the official season and the need for adequate preparation. This incident, however, unfolded differently. The rescue operation itself was called into question. Critics argued that the climbers should not have been attempting such a dangerous climb in December at all. and that their decisions had unnecessarily endangered not just themselves, but also the rescuers tasked with saving them. Others turned their attention to the conduct of the rescue. Were the methods appropriate? Were risks miscalculated? Should responsibility extend beyond the climbers and include the rescuers or organizations involved? What began as a tragic accident soon entered the realm of legal examination, with courts later considering aspects of how the operation was managed. The controversy highlighted a broader issue that extends well beyond this single incident: the balance between individual freedom to climb and societal responsibility when things go wrong. Mount Fuji in winter is not closed, but it is widely understood to be hazardous, with conditions that demand specialized equipment and advanced experience. Yet accidents still occur regularly. Every time rescuers are called in, they put their own lives at risk, and the cost of such operations can be significant. In the 2013 case, these concerns were amplified, as it seemed the decisions of both the climbers and rescuers carried consequences that could not be ignored. The legal scrutiny served as a stark reminder that climbing accidents are not only matters of personal tragedy, but also of public responsibility and systemic reflection. In the end, the December 2013 fall on Mount Fuji stands as more than just another accident in the long list of tragedies on Japan's highest peak. It is remembered as an event that forced people to reconsider how rescue operations should be conducted, who bears responsibility when danger escalates, and how society can better manage the delicate balance between respecting human determination and ensuring safety. The mountain itself remains indifferent, a towering presence of snow and rock, but the discussions that followed this accident continue to shape the way Japan views winter climbing, rescue ethics, and legal accountability on its most iconic summit. It was the early hours of October 31st, 1979. The Night Owl, Western Airlines Flight 2605, cut through the darkness, gliding south from Los Angeles toward Mexico City. Aboard the massive McDonnell Douglas DC-10 were 88 people, business travelers, families, and crew members who had made the red-eye their routine. The flight left LAX at 1:40 a.m., and by the time it neared Mexico, dawn had not yet broken. Only the faintest traces of twilight hung over the city. Thick fog swallowed the ground below. Visibility was vanishing by the minute. At 5:42 a.m., the DC-10 descended into Mexico City International Airport. On paper, it was a standard approach. The controllers cleared the crew for an ILS approach using runway 23L. But here was the fatal problem. 23L wasn't open. It had been closed since October 19th for resurfacing. Trucks and construction vehicles cluttered its surface. Workers were already out there preparing for another long day. Yet the glide path, the familiar beam of the ILS system, still led straight to that runway. The crew had landed here before while 23L was shut down. They knew the procedure. Use the ILS on 23L, then sidestep visually to the parallel open runway, 23R. But Mexico's controllers never used the phrase sidestep approach, a term American pilots would immediately recognize. Instead, they told the crew 4 different times that their landing runway was 23R. The fog was dense. Twilight made the ground look unfamiliar. And still, the DC-10 stayed locked on course for the wrong strip of asphalt. Inside the cockpit, Captain Charles Gilbert, First Officer Ernst Reichel, and Flight Engineer Daniel Walsh believed they were on final for 23R. But in the last moments, realization crept in. The captain cursed. "No, this is the approach to the goddamned left." A second later, the massive DC-10 smashed down, its left landing gear hitting grass and its right landing gear barely catching the shoulder of 23L. The force of impact was brutal. The plane jolted, bouncing violently. The crew pushed for a go-around. Engines roared, and the jet clawed its way back into the sky. For a fleeting instant, it seemed possible that they might recover. But disaster was already set in motion. The right landing gear tore loose, slamming into the horizontal stabilizer. The crippled jet was now bleeding metal and fire. It rolled sharply to the right. In the cockpit, panic erupted. Reichel shouted desperately, "Get it up!" while Gilbert screamed, struggling to control the wounded aircraft. In just seconds, the DC-10 clipped a dump truck, scattering earth and killing its driver. Moments later, the right wing carved into an excavator, tearing further apart. The roll became uncontrollable. The aircraft spiraled, its wingtips slicing into taxiways. Then, with horrifying force, it slammed into an Eastern Airlines maintenance building north of the runways. Concrete shattered. Fireballs erupted. The DC-10 broke apart in a deafening roar as flames engulfed the wreckage. Debris scattered across the airport and into nearby neighborhoods, where pieces of burning wing ignited houses. Rescue crews rushed to the scene, but chaos made every second impossible. Survivors crawled from a 20-foot section of fuselage that had miraculously stayed intact. They looked back to see the rest of the jet consumed in fire. Some described chunks of the shattered building collapsing onto the wreckage even as they escaped. Others remembered only the screams and the unbearable heat before silence overtook the cabin. Of the 88 souls aboard, 72 never made it out alive. One maintenance worker on the ground died instantly when the aircraft crushed his truck. Dozens more were injured, some scarred forever. Mexico City had just witnessed its deadliest aviation accident, a disaster that shocked both nations and exposed fatal cracks in communication, procedure, and decision-making. The investigation would later blame the pilots for continuing below minimums in near-zero visibility and landing on a closed runway. But pilot unions argued the instructions given were vague, confusing, and dangerously inadequate. Whatever the technicalities, one fact remained. In 26 short seconds from first touchdown to final impact, the night owl had turned into a firestorm. And the most chilling part? This was no isolated event. 1979 was a cursed year for the DC-10. In May, American Airlines Flight 191 exploded into flames at Chicago O'Hare, killing 273. 1 month later, another DC-10 suffered a deadly mishap. Then, only weeks after Flight 2605, Air New Zealand Flight 901 would vanish into Antarctica's Mount Erebus. On September 4, 2006, the world lost one of its most vibrant and fearless wildlife warriors in the most shocking way imaginable. Steve Irwin, known across the globe as the crocodile hunter, wasn't deep in the jungle wrestling a crocodile or face-to-face with a venomous snake. He was in chest-deep water on the Great Barrier Reef, filming what should have been routine footage. It was meant to be filler shots for his daughter Bindi's show, something simple and safe. But that day, fate had other plans. As Steve swam near Bat Reef, he approached a stingray, a creature usually considered shy and non-aggressive. The ray was massive, with a wingspan of nearly 2 meters. For a moment, it glided peacefully through the shallow water, and Steve, as he had done countless times before, positioned himself behind it for the camera. But in a sudden twist, the calm scene turned deadly. Mistaking Steve's shadow for a predator, perhaps a tiger shark, the stingray struck without warning. Its tail lashed, the venomous barb plunging directly into Steve's chest. At first, Steve thought he had only suffered a punctured lung, but the truth was far worse. The barb had pierced his heart. In the water, surrounded by his crew, the man who had wrestled crocodiles and charmed millions with his infectious cry of "Crikey" was bleeding to death. Cameraman Justin Lyons and others frantically pulled him onto the boat, performing CPR as they sped toward Low Island in desperate hope. But by the time they reached medical staff, Steve was gone. At just 44 years old, the crocodile hunter had died in front of his team, in front of the cameras, in front of the very nature he loved so deeply. The footage of the incident has never been released. Some claim it was destroyed out of respect. Others say it remains locked away, too harrowing to ever be shown. All we know is that Steve's final moments exist on tape, an unbearably painful reminder of how quickly life can turn. News of his death shook the world. In Australia, flags flew at half-mast. Leaders, celebrities, and ordinary people alike poured out tributes, unable to comprehend that a man so full of life could be gone so suddenly. Fans gathered at Australia Zoo, leaving flowers, notes, and stuffed animals at the gates. Across the globe, millions mourned a man who had brought wildlife into their living rooms and made it thrilling, even joyful. His funeral was private, just as his family wished, but a public memorial at Australia's zoo was broadcast worldwide. Russell Crowe opened the ceremony, joined by messages from Hugh Jackman, Cameron Diaz, Justin Timberlake, Kevin Costner, and countless others who had admired him. More than 300 million people watched as his daughter Bindi gave a heartbreaking tribute, and his favorite song, True Blue, was sung one last time. In a final symbolic gesture, Steve's old truck was driven out of the Crocuseum as staff spelled his iconic catchphrase, "Crikey," in yellow flowers. In the days after, a disturbing trend emerged. Dead stingrays began washing up on Queensland beaches, their tails cut off, believed by some to be acts of revenge for Steve's death. But his friends and family were quick to speak out. This was the last thing Steve would have wanted. His daughter, Bindi herself, said she still loved stingrays and bore them no hatred. To her, and to all who truly knew him, Steve's legacy wasn't about vengeance. It was about love, conservation, and a passion for the natural world. Climbing Mount Fuji sounds like the ultimate bucket list adventure, the kind of thing you tell your friends about for years, complete with selfies at sunrise and dramatic clouds rolling beneath your feet. But beneath the postcards and Instagram shots, Fuji hides a pretty grim secret. It is not just Japan's most iconic mountain. It is also a place where nature reminds people who are really in charge. One of the most heartbreaking examples happened when a 29-year-old Russian climber named Anna Dubrovina tragically lost her life near the summit after being struck by a falling rock. Imagine it. You have powered through the grueling ascent, lungs burning, legs aching, your mind locked on that magical moment of standing at the top, and then out of nowhere, a rogue rock the size of a football comes crashing down like nature's very own wrecking ball. That is what makes Fuji so dangerous. It is not just the thin air, the brutal weather shifts, or the crowds of climbers jostling for space. It is the mountain itself, literally crumbling under your boots. Even small rocks, loosened by someone's step hundreds of meters higher, can gather deadly momentum. And unlike in the movies, there is no heroic dodge move that saves the day. It is pure bad luck mixed with unforgiving physics. Anna's accident shook climbers and officials alike, because if it can happen just a few hundred meters from the summit, it can happen anywhere up there. In response, authorities actually roped off parts of the summit area, like the stone wall near the crater's shrine, because everyone suddenly realized that even spots thought to be safe zones were basically potential bowling alleys for falling rocks. What makes the story sting even more is that so many climbers, especially tourists, underestimate the risks. A lot of people hit Fuji with little more than sneakers, a jacket, and some bottled water, not realizing that helmets can be as essential as hiking poles. Sure, wearing a helmet might ruin your aesthetic for that perfect summit photo, but it beats having a rock ruin your entire existence. And it is not like Anna was reckless. She was experienced and climbing with her husband, which proves this was not some rookie mistake, but a sobering reminder that even careful mountaineers are not immune to Fuji's hazards. The tragedy also sparked bigger conversations in Japan about climbing safety, because every year tens of thousands head up during the official season, often lulled into thinking Fuji is a casual hike rather than a serious alpine challenge. Between falling rocks, altitude sickness, exhaustion, and unpredictable weather that can flip from sunny to blizzard in minutes, Fuji is less a leisurely walk up a national icon and more a volcano with a grudge. The mountain does not care if you are a seasoned climber or just a tourist with a bucket list. If conditions line up wrong, accidents can strike with merciless speed. Still, what keeps people coming back is that Fuji is breathtakingly beautiful, a place that feels otherworldly, spiritual, and larger than life. For Anna Dubrovina, that dream turned into a nightmare, and her story is now part of Fuji's darker legacy, a tale that is retold not to scare people away, but to remind them that respect for nature is non-negotiable. It is sobering, but it is also a call to take climbing seriously. Bring proper gear, plan smartly, and never forget that even as Fuji gives climbers unforgettable views and life-changing moments, it also demands humility, because at the end of the day, the mountain always wins. On the morning of February 21, 1970, Swissair Flight 330 took off from Zurich Airport, bound for Tel Aviv, with Hong Kong as its final destination. On board the Convair CV999 Coronado named Baseland were 38 passengers and 9 crew members. It was supposed to be a routine journey. Instead, just 9 minutes after takeoff, horror struck. A bomb hidden deep within the aft cargo compartment exploded, ripping through the aircraft and filling the cockpit with thick, suffocating smoke. The pilots, blinded and struggling to breathe, fought to turn the plane back toward Zurich. Through the haze, they could barely read their instruments. Every second that passed meant less power, less visibility, and less hope. Air traffic control in Zurich tried desperately to guide the aircraft back. The voices captured on the cockpit radio tell a chilling story. Calm professionalism gave way to rising panic as the crew reported compression problems, then fire on board. Their words became fragmented, muffled, almost drowned out by chaos. "We have fire and smoke on board. I can't see anything," one of the pilots cried. Seconds later came their final, heartbreaking message. 330 is crashing. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. The jet veered west, powerless and off course, before slamming into a wooded area near Randlingen, Switzerland. All 47 souls on board were killed instantly. When investigators arrived, wreckage was scattered through the trees, even pieces of fabric hanging from branches like grim reminders of what had just unfolded in the skies above. Sabotage was suspected almost immediately. Just days before, 3 Palestinian militants had been sentenced in Switzerland, and revenge seemed the most likely motive. Reports at the time hinted at responsibility claimed by a Palestinian splinter group, though denials quickly followed. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. General Command was named in some accounts, though no one was ever convicted. The bomb itself was a cruel piece of engineering, a barometric-triggered device designed to detonate once the aircraft reached altitude. On that very same day, another bomb exploded aboard an Austrian Airlines Caravelle departing Frankfurt. That plane, unlike Swissair 330, managed to land safely. The cruel efficiency of coordinated terror left the world shaken. In the aftermath, questions piled up. Investigators produced a 165-page report pointing to Palestinian involvement. The Swiss public wondered why no one was ever held accountable. Some, like journalist Marcel Gier, would later claim that Switzerland had struck a secret deal with the PLO, looking the other way in exchange for a promise that no more attacks would target Swiss citizens. Officials denied it, yet suspicions linger to this day. It was a warm night on the island of Koh Samui, Thailand in 2015. Tourists were scattered along Lomé Beach, enjoying the calm waters under the glow of the moon. Among them was a 20-year-old German woman, laughing with a friend as they waded into the sea. The water was shallow, quiet, almost inviting. No one suspected that beneath the surface, something invisible and deadly was waiting. Moments later, she screamed. A sting so searing, so unbearable, tore through her body that her friend could only watch in horror. In the darkness, trailing tentacles, nearly 3 meters long, had brushed against her skin. A box jellyfish, one of the most venomous creatures in the world. Its toxins can stop a heart in minutes, shut down the nervous system, and leave even the strongest swimmer helpless. She thrashed in the water, gasping for air, the agony unlike anything a human body should endure. Her friend, stung on the hand, but still able to move, tried desperately to pull her to shore. By the time they reached land, her body was already failing. The excruciating pain gave way to collapse, and despite doctors fighting to save her at a nearby hospital, she was pronounced dead. She wasn't the first. Just months earlier, a young Thai woman had suffered the same fate on a neighboring island. The year before, a 5-year-old French boy was killed in almost the same waters. 3 lives gone in little more than a year, all claimed by a creature so elusive it can slip past unnoticed in waist-deep water. Authorities rushed to respond, torn between saving lives and protecting tourism. Some business owners feared that warning signs would scare visitors away, but experts were blunt. Box jellyfish were appearing more often, drawn in by changing seas, pollution, and the loss of turtles that once kept their numbers down. They weren't floating on the surface like other jellyfish, they were swimming just beneath it, nearly invisible, especially at night. For most of us, the ocean feels like freedom. We splash in the shallows, we swim under the stars. We believe the worst that can happen is a cramp or a current pulling us away. But that night on Koh Samui shattered the illusion. A young woman on vacation, a moment of joy, ended in silence. One brush of translucent tentacles, one sting, and the water that seemed so safe became her grave. In December 1992, Mount Fuji decided to remind everyone why winter climbing is not for the faint-hearted. The iconic volcano may look calm and majestic from a distance, but up close in the middle of winter, it turns into an icy death trap. That year, a group of climbers attempted a winter ascent, and what started as a bold adventure soon spiraled into one of the most infamous accidents in Fuji's history. The climbers were roped together, which was supposed to make them safer. The logic is simple. If one person slips, the others can hold them steady. But in reality, on an unforgiving sheet of ice, that same rope can become a curse. When one climber lost footing, the icy slope turned their stumble into a full-blown chain reaction. Within moments, the group was dragged down together in what has since been described as a mass fall. It was brutal, fast, and unstoppable. The winds were howling, the slope was unforgiving, and the climbers had no chance of recovering once momentum took over. Several lives were lost that day, and the tragedy instantly etched itself into Japan's mountain lore. The accident became a kind of cautionary tale for climbers everywhere. In the years since, the 1992 fall has been reconstructed in animated safety videos shown on Japanese television and later found online. These reconstructions might look simple, even cartoonish, but the story they tell is chilling. They highlight how easily a small slip can snowball into disaster when conditions are extreme and preparation falls short. Fuji in December is nothing like the Fuji of summer, and tourists hike up in sneakers and snap selfies at the summit. Winter, Fuji is a different beast with icy ridges, high winds, and temperatures that cut like knives. In those conditions, even the most experienced climbers tread carefully. The 1992 group, unfortunately, was not prepared for what they were up against. Reports suggest that equipment was lacking, footing was unstable, and the decision to climb roped together on slick ice left no room for error. Once the fall began, it was no longer a climb, but a helpless slide toward tragedy. Looking back, the 1992 accident has been dissected endlessly in safety lectures, mountaineering clubs, and educational programs. The key takeaway is always the same. Winter mountaineering is about respect for the mountain. The rope, that was meant to symbolize teamwork, became a cruel reminder that sometimes the very tools we trust can betray us under the wrong circumstances. Climbers today are taught to keep spacing, check conditions religiously, and know when to turn back. The animated videos that retell the fall might seem dramatic, but they serve a real purpose. They strip away the romanticism of climbing and lay bare the consequences of misjudging Fuji's winter temperament. For Japan, the story remains a haunting example of how easily human ambition can clash with nature's indifference. What makes this tragedy stand out even decades later is how vividly it has been remembered. Many mountain accidents fade into statistics, but the 1992 fall stuck because it showed a group dynamic unraveling in real time. One slip, one gust of wind, one misstep, those were all it took to drag multiple lives down the icy slope. There is a kind of grim poetry to it. The rope meant for unity, binding them together in disaster. The fact that the accident has been animated and reanalyzed repeatedly keeps it alive in public memory, ensuring that new generations of climbers think twice before underestimating Winter Fuji. While tragic, the legacy of 1992 is not just about loss, it is also about awareness. It reminds climbers that mountains are not conquered, they are respected. And for anyone daring to face Fuji in the grip of December, that lesson might very well be the difference between a successful climb and becoming part of the mountain's long, chilling history. On the morning of August 31, 1988, passengers boarded Delta Airlines Flight 1141 at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, expecting nothing more than a routine trip to Salt Lake City. The plane, a Boeing 727-200, had already flown in from Mississippi without incident. For many on board, this was just another hop across the country. But within minutes of takeoff, ordinary would collapse into chaos, leaving behind fire, twisted wreckage, and haunting questions that would change aviation forever. At the controls sat Captain Larry Davis, a seasoned pilot with more than 17,000 hours of flight time, alongside First Officer Kerry Kirkland and Flight Engineer Stephen Judd. Behind them, 4 experienced flight attendants prepared the cabin for departure. Everything about the crew and the aircraft looked normal on paper, but in the cockpit, something was happening that passengers could not see, something that would prove fatal. As the engines hummed and the aircraft taxied toward the runway, the crew was not focused on checklists or the intricate demands of takeoff. Instead, their voices captured on the cockpit recorder reveal a chilling truth. They were talking about dating habits, politics, even joking about what they might say if they crashed. A sterile cockpit, required by law during critical phases of flight, simply didn't exist that morning. Discipline had broken down, and with it, the chain of safety meant to protect every soul on board. At 8:30 a.m., the 727 was cleared for takeoff. As the jet accelerated down the runway, nothing seemed amiss. Passengers felt the familiar surge of power, pressing them into their seats. Wheels left the ground. For a brief moment, it seemed like a normal climb. Then, the aircraft lurched violently. The right wing dropped, the tail scraped the runway, and within seconds, the plane began rolling uncontrollably. In the cockpit, Davis pulled back hard, trying to will the jet into the sky. The engines surged, then coughed with compressor stalls as airflow broke down. Witnesses on the ground saw the 727 staggering just a few hundred feet above the runway, trailing fire as it clipped an antenna array. The right wing began to tear apart in midair. The jet slid sideways, struck the ground, and disintegrated into a fiery trail nearly half a mile long. Inside, passengers screamed as flames engulfed the rear of the cabin. Survivors later recalled that the impact itself wasn't what killed most people. It was the fire and smoke. Some managed to fight their way to exits and escape across the burning wreckage. Others, overcome by smoke, never made it out. One man, having escaped the flames, turned back desperately to save his wife and others still trapped inside. He was pulled from the wreckage alive but burned so badly that he died days later in the hospital. When the smoke cleared, 14 people were dead, 2 flight attendants and 12 passengers. Dozens more were badly injured, including the captain and first officer who survived but carried the scars of their mistakes. The investigation revealed the most devastating truth of all. The crash was entirely preventable. The National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the crash was caused by 2 failures: the crew's lack of discipline, which led them to skip critical steps, and the malfunction of the takeoff warning system, which should have sounded the alarm. But the finger of blame pointed even higher. Investigators found that Delta's culture allowed sloppy cockpit management, and the FAA had failed to crack down, despite knowing about long-standing issues with discipline among crews. The tragedy of Flight 1141 did more than take lives. The embarrassment of hearing pilots joking on cockpit recordings just before disaster struck shook the entire aviation industry. When the tapes were played on television, the outrage was so severe that laws were changed. Never again would raw cockpit voice recordings be released to the public, only written transcripts. The Red Sea is known for its beauty, a paradise for divers, snorkelers, and vacationers who dream of crystal-clear waters. But in December 2010, that paradise turned into a nightmare. What began as an ordinary holiday in the Egyptian resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh became the setting for one of the most shocking and unprecedented shark attack clusters ever recorded. It started on December 1st. The waters near Ras Nasrani were calm, dotted with swimmers enjoying the sun. And then, within minutes, chaos erupted. 4 people, 3 Russians and 1 Ukrainian, were mauled almost back to back. The violence was unimaginable. A woman screamed as a shark tore into her, ripping away her hand and part of her leg. Another tourist fought for her life, blood clouding the water as onlookers scrambled to pull her out. Witnesses recalled using nothing more than swimsuits to bind her wounds, rubber fins to beat the shark back. Tourists, terrified, helpless, watched the sea turn red. The stories from that day were chilling. One husband recounted the moment he heard his wife gasp, "Shark! Shark!" as she struggled against the predator. She lost an arm, then a foot, but somehow fought her way back toward the beach. Another victim managed to reach the pier, only to have the shark strike again, tearing flesh as horrified vacationers tried to drag her to safety. By nightfall, the once bustling shoreline was deserted. Panic spread. Tourists abandoned their sunbeds, retreating indoors. Lifeguards, divers, and officials closed beaches as fear gripped the resort town. Still, the danger wasn't over. Authorities captured 2 massive sharks in the following days, an oceanic whitetip and a mako, hoping they had the culprits. Local officials rushed to assure the public it was safe. Beaches reopened. Life seemed to return to normal. But just one day later, on December 5th, the nightmare struck again. Renate Seifert, a 71-year-old German woman who had vacationed in Sharm el-Sheikh for over a decade, waded into the shallow waters of Nama Bay near the Hyatt Hotel. She had done it many times before, but this time she never came back. A mako shark attacked her in full view of horrified beachgoers. There was a scream, a violent thrashing, and then silence. Witnesses described blood spreading in the water as rescuers pulled her back to shore, but it was too late. Her arm had been severed. She died within minutes. The fear was suffocating. Tourists who had come for sun and luxury now huddled indoors, refusing to go near the sea. Businesses suffered. Bars emptied. Diving excursions vanished overnight. For a resort town that thrived on its reputation for beauty and safety, the attacks left scars deeper than the water itself. But the biggest question was why? Why had sharks, normally elusive, rarely aggressive in these waters, suddenly turned on humans in such a brutal sequence? Experts proposed theories that only made the story darker. Overfishing in the Red Sea had starved the predators, pushing them closer to shore. Unscrupulous divers may have illegally fed sharks, training them to associate humans with food. And perhaps most disturbing of all, during the Islamic festival of Eid al-Adha just weeks earlier, livestock ships had dumped carcasses of sheep into the Red Sea, fresh bait that may have lured hungry sharks unnaturally close to popular beaches. In the end, investigators concluded that both oceanic whitetip and mako sharks were responsible, their attacks triggered by a perfect storm of unnatural conditions: overfishing, illegal feeding, carcass dumping, and rising water temperatures. But for the victims, for the witnesses, and for the resort town whose name became synonymous with fear, the answers brought little comfort. The Red Sea, so often painted as a postcard paradise, had revealed another side of itself. For days, it became a place of terror, and perhaps the most disturbing part of it all is how quickly beauty can turn into horror, how shallow waters, where families laugh and play, can, in an instant, become the stage for unspeakable violence. In October 2019, Japanese live streamer Tetsushi Ohara, known online as Tetsu, embarked on a climb up Mount Fuji, Japan's tallest and most iconic peak. Unlike most climbers who attempt Fuji during the official summer season when conditions are relatively safe, Shiohara chose late October, a time when the mountain is far more treacherous. Off-season climbing is strongly discouraged because the trails are closed, huts are locked, and snow and ice cover the paths. It is a climb that requires specialized gear, training, and careful planning. Unfortunately, Shiohara carried little more than his phone and streaming equipment, leaving him exposed to the harsh environment. He live-streamed his ascent on the Japanese video platform Nico Nico, and his broadcast initially showed a man determined but visibly struggling. Viewers could hear him comment on the freezing cold, his numb fingers, and the slippery snow beneath his feet. While he joked at times, his fatigue and discomfort were clear. His audience, watching in real time, expressed both encouragement and concern, urging him to be careful or even turn back. Yet Shiohara pressed on, despite the worsening conditions. As he neared the summit, the climb became increasingly dangerous. The livestream captured his final moments as a steep, icy slope came into view while he remarked on the treacherous footing. Then, suddenly, he slipped. The camera jolted, snow blurred across the screen, and the sound of him sliding uncontrollably down the mountain filled the broadcast. Moments later, the livestream cut out. It was a chilling and abrupt end to what had begun as an adventurous broadcast. Alarmed viewers quickly notified authorities, who launched a search and rescue operation. The next day, rescuers discovered a body near the 7th station of Mount Fuji at around 3,000 meters in altitude. It was believed to be Shiohara, though reports initially stopped short of immediate confirmation. The discovery brought a tragic close to a story that had unfolded before an online audience. The incident sparked widespread discussion in Japan and internationally. Climbing experts and authorities emphasized the dangers of attempting Mount Fuji outside of the official season, pointing out that Shiohara had been ill-prepared for the conditions. Proper winter climbing requires crampons, ice axes, insulated clothing, and extensive mountaineering experience. Attempting such a climb with inadequate gear while simultaneously distracted by live streaming dramatically increased the risk of disaster. There was also broader reflection on the culture of live streaming itself. Some observers questioned whether the pursuit of content and online attention can push individuals into unnecessary risks. Others were struck by the unsettling reality of watching someone's final moments unfold in real time. A reminder of how technology has blurred the boundary between private tragedy and public spectacle. Reports also surfaced suggesting that Shiohara had previously battled serious illness, possibly stage 4 cancer, though this was never officially confirmed. This detail, if true, painted his climb in a more complex light, less as a reckless stunt and more as a deeply personal journey that ended in tragedy. Ultimately, the story of Tetsu Shiohara is a sobering reminder of both the beauty and the danger of mountains like Fuji. The mountain has always demanded respect, preparation, and humility from those who attempt it. Nature does not bend to human ambition or digital audiences. It remains unforgiving to those who underestimate it. Shiohara's live stream, watched by many, ended not as a tale of triumph, but as a cautionary reminder of the fine line between adventure and risk. His story continues to echo as both a tragedy and a lesson about the responsibilities that come with modern forms of storytelling. On the evening of August 12, 1985, Japan Airlines Flight 123 left Tokyo bound for Osaka. There were 524 people on board. Among them were celebrities, parents with children, even the beloved singer Kyu Sakamoto, whose voice had once brought Japan joy with Sukiyaki. No one could have imagined that within an hour, the aircraft would be reduced to twisted metal in the mountains, with only 4 souls surviving. Just 12 minutes after takeoff, cruising above Sagami Bay, the plane shook violently. A deafening explosion tore through the cabin. Passengers screamed as oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The rear of the plane had literally blown apart, an explosive decompression that ripped off the vertical stabilizer and severed all 4 hydraulic systems. Without hydraulics, the 747 was essentially a drifting coffin. The pilots, Captain Masami Takahama, First Officer Yutaka Sasaki, and Flight Engineer Hiroshi Fukuda, were suddenly fighting the impossible. They yanked at the controls, barked orders, begged the plane to respond, but nothing happened. Their voices, captured forever on the cockpit voice recorder, shifted from calm professionalism to rising desperation. At one point, Takahama muttered words that still chill investigators to this day. "This may be hopeless." For 32 minutes, the aircraft staggered through the skies of Japan, its massive body lurching up and down in phugoid oscillations. From the ground, horrified witnesses looked up to see a Boeing 737 rolling and dipping unnaturally, banking at terrifying angles, its tail missing. Inside, passengers clutched loved ones, prayed, and screamed as the plane rose and fell thousands of feet at a time. Some wrote farewell notes to their families on scraps of paper, knowing the end was coming. And still, the pilots fought, desperately trying to use engine thrust to steer the crippled jet, refusing to give up until the very last second. Tokyo air traffic controllers pleaded with the crew to turn back, to head for Haneda or divert to Nagoya, but the 747 barely responded, rolling left and right as if mocking every command. Oxygen masks at the rear had already stopped working. The pilots themselves ignored their own flight engineers' repeated calls to wear their masks, likely disoriented by hypoxia as precious seconds slipped away. Yet, even in this haze, they tried every desperate trick they could imagine, extending the landing gear, manipulating the flaps, begging the engines to give them some measure of control. But the giant machine was simply too broken. At 6:56 p.m., with the ground proximity warning system screaming in the cockpit, the crippled jet clipped a ridge near Mount Takamagahara. The right wing was torn apart. The aircraft rolled, flipped, and then slammed into another ridge. The explosion lit up the forest, and in an instant, 520 lives were gone. The investigation revealed something even more haunting. This catastrophe was not an act of fate, but of human error years in the making. 7 years earlier, the same plane had suffered a tail strike during a landing in Osaka. Boeing technicians had repaired the damage, but incorrectly. Instead of reinforcing the pressure bulkhead with a single continuous plate, they had used 2 smaller plates. This mistake weakened the structure, leaving it vulnerable to fatigue. Every pressurization cycle since then had been ticking time bomb. On Flight 123, it finally gave way. When the truth came out, the horror deepened. The crash was not only the deadliest single aircraft disaster in history, it was also one that could have been prevented. It was a warm Florida evening, June the 14th, 2016, at Disney World's Grand Floridian Resort. For the Graves family from Elkhorn, Nebraska, this was supposed to be one of those nights. 2-year-old Lane Thomas Graves was playing along the sandy edge of the Seven Seas Lagoon. His sister Ella was close by. His parents, Matt and Melissa, only steps away. Just behind them, Disney's outdoor screening of Zootopia played across a big screen as kids giggled and parents relaxed. It felt picture perfect, the very essence of Disney, happiness and safety wrapped together. And then, in an instant, that illusion shattered. At around 8:30 p.m., when families were beginning to wind down for the night, something stirred beneath the lagoon's dark surface. To most, it was invisible, silent, steady, patient. But to the sharp eyes of nature, this was prime hunting hour. Lane bent near the water's edge, innocent and curious, and that's when it happened. A shadow rose, a sudden rush. An alligator nearly 8 feet long lunged from the water and clamped its jaws around the little boy. The splash ripped through the night air. Lane's father, Matt, didn't hesitate. He hurled himself into the water, his hands clawing, pulling, biting with every ounce of desperation a parent could summon. He screamed. He kicked. He tried to wrench his son free from the predator's grip, but the animal was relentless. In mere seconds, the water swallowed them both, and then Lane was gone. Chaos erupted. Families screamed, staff rushed, and the lagoon that had seemed so peaceful only moments earlier was now a scene of horror. Search teams mobilized, divers, wildlife officers, Disney staff, all working through the long night, combing every inch of the water. Parents across the country stayed glued to their screens, whispering prayers for a boy they'd never met. But by morning, hope was fading, and then, 17 hours later, the truth surfaced. Lane's body was found just 6 feet underwater, only yards from where he had been taken. The autopsy confirmed what no parent should ever hear: Lane had drowned. His small body bore the marks of the attack, but it wasn't just nature's violence that haunted people. It was how ordinary the setting had been. A child playing by the water, parents just feet away, a resort known for fantasy and magic. The shock turned quickly to questions. Why weren't there warning signs about alligators? Why did the posted signs only mention no swimming? Guests had reported seeing gators before, but no strong measures were taken. It was Disney after all, a place where danger felt unthinkable. In the days that followed, the company moved quickly. Nearly 100 alligators were removed from Disney properties. Barriers were built around the lagoon. Signs were replaced, this time with warnings that left no room for doubt. But for the Graves family, those changes came too late. Mount Fuji has always been more than just a mountain. It is a national symbol, a cultural icon, and a natural wonder that draws hundreds of thousands of climbers each year. But beneath its postcard beauty lies an unforgiving reality. The mountain can be deadly, especially outside the carefully managed climbing season. In late June 2024, just days before the official season was set to begin, tragedy struck when 4 climbers lost their lives on its slopes. The incident sent shockwaves through both the mountaineering community and the general public, serving as a reminder that even familiar landscapes can turn hostile when underestimated. The most widely reported case was that of Keita Kurakami, a 38-year-old professional climber admired for his skill and bold ascents. Kurakami was no novice. He had made a name for himself in Japan and internationally for tackling difficult routes and inspiring others with his passion for the sport. Yet, on June 26th, while ascending the Yoshida Trail, he collapsed around the 8th station, high enough that the air was thin and the conditions harsh. Despite rescue efforts and being rushed to a hospital, he passed away. For many, his death was shocking, not only because of his reputation but also because it underscored how unpredictable the mountain can be, even for those with years of experience. Reports noted that Kurakami had a history of heart trouble, and it is believed that underlying health issues played a role. On the same day, authorities discovered 3 more bodies near Mount Fuji's crater in separate locations. Their identities were not immediately released, and it remains uncertain whether they were climbing together or individually. What was clear, however, is that none of them had the benefit of open huts, staffed rescue facilities, or the safety measures that come into place when the season officially begins on July 1st. These individuals had ventured into Fuji's upper reaches when the mountain was at its most dangerous, with trails still closed, weather unstable, and rescue operations limited. Japanese officials were quick to warn the public once again about the hazards of off-season climbs. Each year, some enthusiasts ignore the rules, eager to avoid the summer crowds or to test their endurance in harsher conditions. But June 2024 demonstrated the risks in the starkest possible way. The crater area, where 3 of the bodies were recovered, is treacherous even in midsummer. Snow and ice can linger, the winds are fierce, and a single misstep can prove fatal. Add the lack of medical and logistical support in the off-season, and the odds of survival drop significantly if something goes wrong. Kurakami's passing added a particularly tragic dimension because it symbolized that expertise does not make anyone invincible. For fellow climbers, it was a sobering wake-up call. Social media and climbing forums are filled with tributes, with many reflecting on how easily ambition, passion, or the simple desire to reach the summit can blind even seasoned climbers to very real dangers. His death, coupled with the 3 others, turned what was supposed to be the exciting build-up to Fuji's 2024 season into a nationwide discussion about safety, responsibility, and respect for nature. In the end, Mount Fuji stood silent and unmoved. It will continue to rise 3,776 meters above Japan, attracting dreamers, adventurers, and thrill-seekers. But the June 2024 incident remains etched in memory as a grim reminder. Fuji may be majestic and inspiring, but it demands caution. The mountain does not bend to human pride, preparation, or even expertise. Every step upward must be taken with humility, because on Fuji, beauty and danger are 2 sides of the same slope. On a freezing January afternoon in 1982, Washington, D.C., the Potomac River below the 14th Street Bridge was coated in jagged sheets of ice. For most people, it was just another miserable winter day. But for the 79 people boarding Air Florida Flight 90, it would become a nightmare that the world would never forget. The flight, a Boeing 737, bound for Fort Lauderdale with a stop in Tampa, was delayed nearly 2 hours. What the passengers didn't know was that the storm wasn't their greatest enemy. The real danger came from inside the cockpit. Captain Larry Wheaton, 34, sat at the controls, with First Officer Roger Pettit, 31, beside him. Both were experienced pilots, but neither had much real-world experience flying in icy conditions like the ones that gripped Washington National Airport that day. They had watched other planes struggle, engines roaring against the frozen ground, wings icing over faster than crews could keep them clear. And yet, despite the clear risks, Flight 90 pushed forward. The plane had already faced problems just leaving the gate. Ice made it impossible for the tug vehicle to push the aircraft back, so the crew tried something desperate, using reverse thrust to free themselves. That decision was against Boeing's recommendations, but it revealed something even more alarming. The crew wasn't following safe winter protocols. They hadn't even switched on the engine anti-ice systems, a safeguard designed specifically for days like this. As the aircraft inched toward the runway, passengers peered out at the snow swirling in the wind. They could see ice clinging stubbornly to the wings, but the crew didn't return for a second round of de-icing. Instead, they tried another risky move, taxiing close behind a DC-9 in hopes its engine heat would melt the snow. What actually happened was far worse. The jet blast melted the snow, which then refroze as an icy layer across the wings and engine inlets. Finally, just before 4 p.m., the plane roared down the runway. Inside the cockpit, Pettit couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that something was wrong. The instruments told them they had enough thrust, but the sound and feel of the engines told a different story. "God, look at that thing," Pettit said nervously. "That don't seem right, does it?" Captain Wheaton brushed him off. Seconds later, the plane lifted clumsily into the air, climbing no higher than a few hundred feet before the stall. Warning blared. The stick shaker rattled violently. "Stalling! We're falling!" Wheaton cried. "Larry, we're going down!" Pettit shouted. "I know," the captain yelled back. Those were his last words. At 4:01 p.m., in less than half a minute of flight, Air Florida Flight 90 slammed into the 14th Street Bridge, crushing cars and trucks caught in the evening traffic. Steel railings twisted like paper, 7 vehicles destroyed, 4 motorists killed instantly. Then, with a deafening roar, the plane plunged straight into the frozen Potomac. In seconds, 78 people were dead or trapped. Only the broken tail remained above the icy water, where a handful of survivors clung desperately. The temperature was just 34 degrees. The river clogged with ice. They had minutes before hypothermia would take them. The crash site was chaos. Traffic jams blocked ambulances from getting through. Rescuers stood helpless on the shore, throwing ropes that fell short while survivors screamed in agony, their bodies slick with jet fuel. When the last survivor was pulled to shore, the silence was deafening. The wreckage of Flight 90 sank slowly beneath the ice, vanishing into the black water as if it had never existed.